Great. So let's get restarted here. Hopefully you've all found that was a great way to kind of start and think about new business models and the role of technology, et cetera. We're now really fortunate to have with us Keith Kratzberg. He's an Anderson alum. He's the president and CEO of Epson America. He's going to discuss new normals. He's going to discuss skills of the future. He's going to talk about leadership implications. And we're very, very fortunate to have Paula Judge as our moderator. She's VP of Talent for Accel, which is a luminary seed, early stage, and growth stage venture capital firm. They power a whole community of entrepreneurs. Paula's got deep experience with executive level talent and advising entrepreneurs about how to attract, retain, and develop talent in every phase of their own growth. Prior to Accel, Paula led recruiting at the high-growth cybersecurity company Palo Alto Networks. And before that, she was an executive recruiter at the global retained search firm Heidrick and Struggles. Early on, she had a very different career in nonprofit management with the San Francisco Ballet, with the Robert Toigo Foundation, proving that career pivots are possible and often very, very successful. Paula earned her degree in history from UCLA. Go Bruins. I had to remind everybody of that. She currently serves as the chair of the UCLA Northern California Chancellor's Society, and she's a member of the UCLA History Department Board of Advisors. As a reminder, we're going to use Slido for questions on this, so slido.com, and enter in event code Innovate 2, the number 2, Innovate 2, and those will be the questions that Paula will take later on. Paula, let me now turn it over to you, and a big welcome.
Thank you, Terry. It's great to be here today, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for what promises to be a timely discussion on technology, innovation, and our current environment. As Terry mentioned, I'm Paula Judge. I'm a history grad and VP at Accel today. I'm excited to be with you. In recent years, we've seen two significant trends impact personal and business lives. First, obviously, the pandemic, which, among many things, accelerated the rise of work in digitization, and it caused major turmoil to global supply chain, impacting nearly all sectors. Technology companies in particular have struggled to source important electronics components, resulting in major delays in productions. We've also seen the rise in what we're now calling remote and hybrid work. And while the shift to remote work has been mandatory for many during the pandemic, thousands of companies, Epson included, have embraced this trend and provided teams and employees with very progressive work from home accommodations. The downstream implications, of course, on employee morale, career development, company culture, productivity, and more, they're all yet to be seen. Second, there have been mounting environmental concerns and a renewed sense of urgency around climate change or climate crisis, depending on how you're looking at it. Corporations have an impactful role to play in reducing their environmental footprint by developing a more sustainable supply chain and industrial processes. Epson has been a clear leader here on this issue and has announced its intention to become carbon negative and underground resource free by 2050. With a goal to achieve sustainability and to contribute to enriching communities. So these are some of the important topics that we'll chat about today, where we will hear insights into how these trends are impacting the industry and how it's impacted Epson's strategy in this new environment. Before we dive in, a bit about Epson. Epson is a global technology leader dedicated to co-creating sustainability and enriching communities by leveraging its efficient, compact, and precision technologies and digital technologies to connect people, things, and information. The company is focused on solving societal issues through innovations in home and office printing, commercial and industrial printing, manufacturing, visual, and lifestyle. As I mentioned, Epson's goal is to become carbon negative and eliminate use of exhaustible underground resources such as oil and metal by 2050. Founded in Japan, Seiko Epson is composed of 82 different companies with 80,000 employees and about $9 billion US in annual revenue. That's quite a footprint. So with that, I'm delighted to have President and CEO of Epson America, Keith Kratzberg, here with us today. Keith oversees all business strategy for Seiko Epson in the Americas, including sales and marketing, distribution, product development, and its sustainability strategy. He's responsible for driving innovation and market leadership across Epson's product range of imaging products and business solutions. Keith got a new job when he spearheaded Epson America's pandemic response from an operations, infrastructure, and supply chain standpoint, led its workforce transition to remote and hybrid routines, and today continues to lead Epson through the, quote, new normal. Since joining Epson in 1996, he has held increasingly responsible positions in product management, sales, strategy, and general management. Keith received his MBA from the UCLA Anderson School and his bachelor's degree in applied mechanics from UC San Diego. So as Terry mentioned, your Slido code for this is Innovate 2, and I'm going to dive right into chatting with Keith. So Keith, while I was reading your bio, I just sort of glossed over the fact that you've been with the company since 1996, and today you run a significant portion of the operations. I'd love to start out by just taking a couple of minutes for you to walk us through your journey and maybe speak to a couple of either key challenges or key opportunities that you saw along the way.
Well, good morning, Paula. Good to be with you today. And
You too.
I think, thank you for the nice introduction. I think we've got a really tough act to follow. I was listening in on Terry and Gail's last 20 minutes, and that was a really wonderful conversation that they had with a lot of great insights from Gail. So you asked about my journey here on Epson. So yeah, I graduated the full-time MBA program in 1992, and so my initial target was I really wanted to be part of a high-growth tech opportunity, and I found a company down in San Diego that was experiencing high growth, and I went and I was a part of that for about 4 years and had a lot of opportunity. We did a management buyout, but in the end, that did not all pan out. And but it was in the printing space, and Epson had just introduced a new type of color technology. So I moved over to Epson America as a product manager. So took a step back in title. I was a director at the smaller company, came into the company as a product manager, and began my journey here. And it was really a perfect example of being in the right place at the right time. Epson was evolving its strategy, bringing a lot of new technology to the market, and was going through a transition in its workforce and its management team. And I got to be a part of that and was at the right place to have sort of continuous upward movement from product manager to president and CEO over a period of about 20 years. You mentioned Seiko Epson is a roughly $9 billion corporation, and now Epson America is about a third of that. We're a $3 billion subsidiary, so we're about a third of the business. So I ran product management for a wide variety of products. I was given business management for a key area of the P&L with our supplies business. I was given roles in new business development, which is a challenge at a large organization like this. And then I took on various aspects of the sales organization and eventually became vice president of sales and marketing for both, at first for just consumer, then consumer and commercial. Then I took on responsibility for Latin America as well. Had some service operational responsibility in there. And, pretty unusual, I think. I was groomed for this position for quite a while. I think it became pretty clear to the organization that I was the next person in line for the role. I worked for my predecessor for more than 10 years, and then moved into this role a bit more than 5 years ago.
Fantastic. I caught just the end of Gail's presentation where she encouraged people to lean into opportunities. And it sounds like you did exactly that inside of Epson.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought she was very wise in her guidance. Yeah, I agree with her.
Excellent. All right, well, let's switch our attention now a little bit to the pandemic, or well, let's just call it the new normal. And when we caught up last week, you mentioned that just before the pandemic, Epson moved into a brand new corporate headquarters, and then was faced with this just hard pivot of transitioning to work from home. I'd love to spend a little bit of time, describing this transition for you and for Epson. Reflecting back now on 2 years, what are a few of the things that you did that you felt really worked really well when you made that transition?
Yeah, so let me set the stage first. So the Epson America organization, before the pandemic, you had a large number of people in, hundreds of people in our distribution facilities who need to come in to work every single day or we can't function. They're shipping, receiving, physically working on products. You had a large group of remote salespeople who have been working out of their homes for decades. Okay, a few hundred like that. And then you had roughly 1,000 people who were working in various headquarter locations, either here in Southern California for the United States, or up in Toronto for Canada, or in 13 different countries in Latin America. And Epson has a long history, so we are a very mature organization, extremely collaborative in our work style, very team-based. And so basically everything happened in the facility. And so, we had flexibility in name, but in reality, people came into the office for the most part every single day. And so if you had asked people on February 10th, if anyone thought the company could operate if everybody went home the next day, I think universally you would have gotten a 100% no, the company will fall apart, there's no way we could function. Fortunately, we had the technology in place, so we were able to transition to work at home basically overnight. The employees were absolutely amazing in terms of their flexibility, because we are, for the most part, a hardware company, whether you're talking about printers or robots or scanners or augmented reality products. And so the employees were extremely flexible in terms of bringing equipment from the headquarters to their personal homes. I mean, we had robot development engineers with robots in their garages to work on new solutions, to solve customer problems, printers of all sorts. But we did it on a dime. I mean, it was basically overnight. We went from having everyone in the offices to everybody at home. We were able to continue operations the whole time. As an essential business, we feed into a wide variety of industries, whether it's education, healthcare, telecommunications. So, our goal was to keep everything operating, and we were able to do that. So very quickly, it was, I think, sort of surprising in a positive way and shocking to everyone, we're doing this, it's working. And then that is when I started the process of thinking about, okay, now that that's taken care of and we are succeeding, we're functioning, what are we going to do about the future? Because all of those old legacy assumptions about what's possible were now proven to be wrong. And I think probably myself, like many people, thought this would end much faster than it still hasn't ended, right? So I pretty quickly started working on plans, or what are we going to do post-pandemic? And how are we going to actually take advantage of what we learned that we can do as an organization to be more competitive, more successful, more nimble in the future. And that's when I started developing, working with my team on our new plans for what we would do afterwards.
Congratulations on, business continuity during this. It was, I'm sure, a lot harder than it sounded like. So one thing that I understand is that, so you talked about like immediately starting in on planning for the future, right? Mm-hmm. And now I understand that as we evolve towards the future, that now your work from home policies are pretty progressive. So from an in-office culture to now employees only need to be in the office 6 days a month, and it can be any 6 days in a month. So could you share with us a little bit about how that policy came about, how you landed on that, and how you see its impact on the company, positive, or if there are new challenges that you haven't anticipated?
Right. Well, so I assume most of the people listening were listening to the prior segment with Gail, and just in the 15 minutes that I heard her talk a lot about really trying to understand things from the perspective of the employee and what they're dealing with, and really providing them flexibility. I think I completely agree with her from what I heard. What I found is that if you talk to the employees, and I did a lot of one-on-one conversations, as well as we did a lot of surveys of the company, repeatedly about what they were thinking, what they were looking for. What you consistently heard from people is, this is working, I'm productive, it's not necessarily easy, there are things they needed for support. The biggest challenge was those with children at home when schools were closed. Okay, so school, daycare issues. Those were really their biggest challenges, but working from home had a lot of benefits. What I found is the more senior the person you talk to, whether in Epson or in other companies, because I was constantly talking to leaders of other companies as well. What are you thinking? What are you going to do? What I found is that the more senior those people were, the more their assumption was, this can't work long term, and we need to get people back in the office and get back to the way things were before. We need to, this has been a crazy aberration in history. We need to go back to what we know what we know works. I think probably of all the industries, the one that was, not to pick on anyone, but I would say in the press, it seemed like some of the New York-based investment banks were really aggressive. We got to get everybody back in. Where more of the technology companies tended to be on the more flexible side. So you have that dynamic going on, and then, it keeps extending, right? And then what starts happening is we saw the emergence of what now people talk about as the Great Resignation, and people leaving companies, and talk about people being interested in fully remote opportunities. And again, we performed very well, but we did have just a very small number, I mean, single digit number of regrettable losses of people leaving the company. And they left for fully remote opportunities. And at this point, we hadn't talked about what was going to be our policy. So what I decided was we needed to get ahead of that negative trend, even though we had no idea when when we were actually put in place hybrid. We needed to tell people concretely what was going to be the hybrid policy. We needed to get it out there, because given our history where we weren't very flexible, the natural assumption for people would be that we would tend to be conservative and not give people a lot of flexibility. So then what I did is our executive team worked together. We looked at the survey information, and we asked people what they wanted. And what I was looking for is, what is the most flexible solution that we thought could possibly work for us. We'll take risk on it. It'll lean to the extreme side, but that's where I want to start. Let's see if we can make this work. And at first I was thinking we would do 8 days a month. There were a lot of employees who thought 4 days a month was enough, and basically we split the baby and came up with 6 days a month. And I really thought that there's so many different operational teams, sales and marketing groups inside our organization, so many different customer bases. It didn't make sense to have a one-size-fits-all policy. I thought a federal approach of letting the local teams work out what worked best for them would be a better way to start. And I also think that creates experimentation where you can learn from each other in terms of some ideas are going to be better than others. So rather than thinking that we know what's best for everybody, let them experiment, let them try things. And so we came up with 6 days a month. By the way, we also said also 1 calendar month a year, you can work from anywhere. You can be completely remote. And so we added that in. And so we actually started it on November 1st. A lot of companies who weren't as flexible kept pushing off their start date, and they never really started their hybrid work. We actually did start ours on November 1st. Right. It worked extremely well. I personally thought there would be no one here on Mondays and Fridays. What I found was that there are actually a significant number of people who wanted to come in on the quiet days, so they purposely chose Monday and Friday. And so we had people here all 5 days. Tuesday was the most popular day, where we had more than 50% of the employees in the office. And then it was great having people together. It was great having all that reconnection, starting all that person-to-person teamwork that everybody has been longing for. I would say the funniest comment that I've heard from people, and I hear it in a lot of different organizations, is, gee, it's great to be back in the office and see people, and I just can't wait to get home so I can get my work done again, because I'm so much more productive at home.
That's great. So, you mentioned that some of your employees, brought home robots and were working on them in their garage. I'd love to spend a couple of minutes now, if you would, talking about Epson and innovation, specifically as it relates to how are you actually enabling your both consumers and your own employees to work from home? I mean, are you able to talk about the product roadmap, or what particular products you see facilitate work from home best, and then do you have any sense of trends along
Well, so a huge industry trend is that when the pandemic hit and everyone went home, there was massive investment in home offices, and so personal computers were sold out, and then basically all of the equipment for home offices demand basically went through the roof. And as you talked about, the supply chain challenges. Epson's single largest business is all-in-one printers for home offices. The printers that you would find in Best Buy, Staples, Amazon. And so there was very large demand for those products. Also, a few years ago, we introduced a new model for the home printer, our EcoTank products, where instead of being cartridge-based, they come with a very, very multi-year large supply of ink and large tanks. And so you don't have that problem of running out of ink or toner. And so those products were essentially the perfect printer for the pandemic, where everyone was using their equipment a lot, and nobody wants to run out of anything because you can't find anything. Nobody wants to go shopping. So there was tremendous demand for our EcoTank products. So I would say that was the single biggest thing we did in terms of feeding into the market needs for working at home. I'd say there are lots of other products as well, but that's the largest one. I'd say for what we did, we were already completely up. We have hundreds of sales representatives and service people working out of their home offices. So we were completely set up with both Teams and Zoom, and we've always made both available to people to use as they saw best fit the need. And people do use both. They bounce back and forth to each one. We also use WebEx for some things. So we are multi-platform in terms of collaboration technologies. So that was good. We helped people with the equipment they needed from their offices. I would say that our IT team did an absolutely amazing job for the individuals who had worked in headquarters, really had no history of being mobile based or home based, and many of them didn't even have laptops. They were using desktop computers in their office, and it wasn't really practical for them to take these things home. And now they had to, and actually that hardware didn't have enough horsepower to actually correctly operate Teams and Zoom, which wasn't a need for them in the past. And we were able to stand up some temporary solutions in the cloud using some AWS capabilities and virtual PCs that they were able to use. And it was a mad scramble to get everybody updated laptops. Now everybody has laptops and everybody has up-to-date hardware and can use all of the necessary tools.
Great. You touched a little bit on the supply chain. And so, we're still in major disruption to the global supply chain. But as a company, Epson has made the choice to be more vertically integrated than most. And even your discussion of the ink sounds like maybe in some ways this helped to shield you from disruption. So I'd love to hear a little bit about where you shielded or where there are impacts. And then do you think that this may lead to more vertical integration in the tech industry?
I think, so if I start at the end, I would say that I think it will lead to people thinking about their supply chains with more of a sense of risk management than they did in the past, because it had worked so well for so long and no one ever imagined this scenario. I think what's likely is that things that are offshored mostly in Asia now could be nearshored more in Mexico and Latin America, Central America, where they also have some similar capabilities that we have in Asia. So that would be the shift that I would see. For Epson, honestly, it's a mixed bag. I mean, we have very large Epson factories in Japan, in China, in the Philippines, Indonesia. And I mean, this is a global pandemic. So it hit different countries at different times. So when it was hot in China, we were looking great in the Philippines and Indonesia. When it hit Indonesia, it was devastating. And this has been, I don't think anyone came out of this, untouched. And so you're touched in different ways at different times. I think the thing to really understand about the supply chain is that when the shutdown happens, there are hundreds of billions of dollars of experiences that became unavailable. And consumers and businesses shifted their dollars to products. And so you had a overall increase in demand in products, whether you're talking about PCs or printers or toys or whatever it is. And nobody was ready for that demand. Yeah. And the transportation system wasn't ready for that demand. And so everybody's trying to catch up. Semiconductors, I would say, is the biggest problem because of the lead time in standing up new fabs. And so everybody's impacted by that issue. But also you have the issue with the transportation system, containers. You have a critical product. Your customer wants you to put it on an airplane, fly it over. Yeah, okay. Can you even get a spot on an air freight? And by the way, the cost of that right now is possibly 30 times what it was before the pandemic. So can you can you do it economically? So we are still in that situation, and it looks to me like it will definitely continue for at least another 6 months, and it'll probably be another year before we start to somewhat normalize.
Such an important point you made there. I mean, I'm sure people are thinking even about their own personal situation, like as a family. Well, of course, we couldn't have experiences. So even we watched our own like shift to products be dramatic. And you multiply that by, what are we at? 6 billion people. I mean, that's unprecedented.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about work from home one more time, and then we'll transition into climate. I wondered if you'd share with us a little bit, remote and distributed work, right, versus work from home. But remote and distributed work, it's here to stay now. This is what we're hearing, right? It's here to stay. It's the new normal. It's the new way of working. I'm curious to hear what you think about advantages. We talked a little bit about your employees already, but maybe expound on that. And then some disadvantages, and then how you personally, Keith, work to build culture in settings in a now fully distributed setting.
Yeah. So okay. So advantages. So we had a cycle of employee meetings before the pandemic started, and we were always trying to improve that cycle and improve communication and keep everybody aligned. We took it very seriously. We worked very hard at it. So we go in the pandemic, and it is a crisis. Okay. And so now you're in crisis mode, not normal operations improvement mode. And in a crisis, communication from the top of the company to everyone is absolutely essential. So I started using the tools in a way that I had never used them before, because we were more of a face-to-face company, and we would have management meetings in person. We would have some people remote, but the majority was focused on in person because that was seen as most important. And so I started doing virtual meetings like this with all of the employees at the same time. And I would share our view and understanding of what was happening with the pandemic, what that meant for us, the decisions that we were making operationally. Of course, at that early on, everybody's concerned whether they're going to have a job, whether they're going to be laid off. By the way, Epson did not lay off one person connection with the pandemic. We did not put anyone on temporary time. We kept everybody on the whole time because we needed all the people. We were going to continue operating, just operating in a different way. So I had to communicate that, and there are a lot of questions. And so, just like you're doing, where you're collecting the questions, answering them in real time, it's very powerful. So I do that. I do it again 2 weeks later. I do it again 2 weeks later. I think after the second or third one, my vice president of HR, who actually, like me, did come to the office, so I would see her, comes up to me and says, Keith, whatever happens with this pandemic, you can never stop having these online employee meetings. So he said, we have more in the most difficult situation, we have people more clear and more aligned now than we ever have had in the past. And so, right then, my whole model of how I communicate for the future, it instantly changed. And people would ask me, well, when are we going to start having, those old style meetings again in the future? I said, never. We're doing it like this from now on. This is the way we're doing it because it's better. It puts everybody on an equal footing. There are things that you lose, so we have to find other ways of bringing those back in. So I'd say that's probably the best positive. I think that, for those hundreds of people that had always been remote, what you heard from them is finally everybody else understands what I've been dealing with my entire career. Okay, and now people are becoming more empathetic to the challenges of being remote and acting in a way that's more productive for everyone. So that's good. And I think that we don't know how much of a need there will be for personal interaction. For Epson, it's a little bit easy because we are an office equipment company. And so we have an absolute need for physical facilities. And, we have to demonstrate the products, right, to our customers. So there really isn't a question of whether we would keep our facilities or not. We'll definitely keep our facilities. It's how we'll use them. And that can evolve over time. And so, my view is anyone who says they know how it's going to be 3 years, 5 years down the road, they're just kidding themselves. Nobody knows. Nobody knows how this is going to play out, how we'll adapt and adjust. So we just have to figure it out as we go along.
Fantastic, thank you. I wanted to transition a little bit to Epson's carbon neutral strategy and just talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to ask my question, but I'm also going to pull in one from the Slido because I think it's relevant. And actually, I think somebody asked the question better than I did. Can you discuss the underground resource-free goal? And given that Epson is a hardware company, what's the alternative for many of the metal components in the printers?
Right, okay. So first, a little history. So Epson has a long history. And Epson was the largest privately held company in Japan before we went public about roughly, I think it was like 18 years ago. And now we're traded on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. And so there was a family ownership of this, I think it was a $6 billion company back then. And the company is headquartered in the Japanese Alps in the Nagano area, beautiful area of Japan. Is where the Winter Olympics were. I think it was 2000, where the Winter Olympics were in Japan. Beautiful area on Lake Suwa. And the leaders of the company were very early in terms of having concern about the environment. And so, in fact, of all the semiconductor manufacturing companies in the world, Seiko Epson Corporation was the first one in the world to eliminate CFC chlorofluorocarbons from our production processes. Okay. And so we have always thought about this and talked about it, though maybe not been very public about it. And in fact, if you go back to our design philosophy, what we've always said is we want to build our hardware products that are compact, precise, and energy saving. And so if you think about hardware products, whether you're talking about printers or electric cars or airplanes or rockets or anything else, building things that are compact, precise, and energy saving, those are pretty much the goals for building things that are environmental. So it's always been in our approach, in our DNA, and how we do things. And I talked about that EcoTank product. There was an example of where we eliminated the cartridges from the solution. Okay, and all that waste, and that's happening right now, where we're eliminating millions and millions of cartridges from the environment as people are transitioning over those tank models of printers. So then going forward, now we've put out a vision for 2050, as you said, being carbon negative and eliminating resources from the ground. And in 2030, having our total emissions be in line with the 1.5 degree centigrade scenario of the targets for global warming. So those are extraordinarily challenging. How do you get to that? So what I will tell you is that we have already transitioned all. Okay, so you talk about Epson vertically integrated. We manufacture with Epson employees in Epson factories, whether you're talking Japan, United States, China, Philippines, Indonesia, Europe, Epson factories, Epson employees. It's not outsourced. Obviously, we have to buy parts from suppliers. But all of our factories now are 100% renewable energy. These new Epson headquarters in Los Alamitos, hour down the road from UCLA, we just put $1 million of solar panels on the roof of the two buildings, and I'm waiting to see are we going to be energy zero in our facilities, because our consumption has been changing so much. Let's see how it looks, but I think there's a chance we'll be zero energy. We have so about your metal question, we have a company in our portfolio. It's called Atmix. And what Atmix does is it has a unique technology for grinding metal into an extremely fine metallic powder. And then that metal can be formed into metal products with a high degree of precision. The way that some people describe it, it's not exactly accurate, but if you think of the way injection molding works for plastic, we're essentially able to do that with metal by having this metal powder technology. And so one of our ideas is that can we reclaim metal from old products, separate the metals, grind them down to powder, and then remold metals for the new components that we need. That's one of the ideas. Okay. I don't know if that's going to solve all the targets, but I think that's a good place to start. I think for the plastics, which mostly come from new petroleum that is drawn from the ground. I think a lot of companies are looking at how can we do a better job of using recycled plastics. Obviously, there's a huge problem in our society right now of plastics going into the environment. We need to capture those. We need to bring them back into the circular economy in terms of new product development. But I also think there's interesting things that can be done in terms of plant-based plastics for the future as well. And so that would be how do you use plastic products without taking resources from the ground if you're using renewable plant-based resources for your materials. So huge amount of work to be done. Epson's not going to solve all of this on our own, but I think that we are a leader in many of these areas. We also have a really interesting paper recycling technology where we have a product called Paper Lab that will take used paper and will break it down to the paper fiber level so it can either be reformed into new paper for writing and printing. And we actually use that paper fiber for the waste ink pads that is in all the printers. So we take waste paper and turn it into a component in the printers.
Wow, that's just amazing to hear all of that. It really is, it's incredible. We're gonna return to that in a minute through a few more questions, but for the last part of our kind of setup Q&A, I'd love to just ask you to, we kind of wanted to move on to career advice a little bit, right? You're an Anderson alum. We've got a lot of Anderson students, perhaps alums in the audience today. What do you want to leave them away? What do you want the students here and the participants to walk away with? Whether it's where to focus your time, skills, life lessons from, a little bit.
Yeah, I hear you. By the way, I think Gail's summary was fantastic, so I don't need to restate that. I mean, I think what she said really, she nailed it. I would add two things. When I was at Anderson, there was a professor who's no longer at the school who taught strategy. And one of the things that he told us is that, his advice was, if you can get into an industry and spend your career in that industry, there is a depth of knowledge that there is no replacement for just time. Okay. And that has absolutely benefited me. I never planned to spend my career in the printing industry, but now I have spent in these two different companies 30 years, and it's very hard to replace that quickly. So I would say time in one industry is good advice. And then in addition to things that Gail said in terms of asking questions and everything, there's one piece of advice that I often give people, which is that what's so important is you need to look at your role not from your perspective, but you need to look at your role from the perspective of those that are essentially above you on the organization chart. Because they will never completely explain to you what is expected of you. But if you really have a desire for general management, if you really have a desire for leadership, if you really have a desire for growth, and if you are sharp enough to get into Anderson, okay, then there is no doubt you have the ability to pretend that you are chairman of the board of your company and think about what are their problems and how do those problems bubble down to me? What do I really need to be focused on? As well as your immediate supervisor and your boss's boss. And if you look at your job that way, you will be much more successful than if you focus on what you think is important and focus on the written job description that someone has given you. Because what's most important isn't written down, but you can figure it out. So just figure it out.
Yeah. Ultimately a career talent person, I'd just like to +1 both of those. I mean, couldn't have said it better. And really, they're both very, very meaningful and important. So thanks. Thanks so much, Keith. I think we have a few minutes for questions, so I'm going to turn over to the Slido, and then maybe in 5 minutes or so, we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
So one thing we didn't talk about relative to Epson's sort of like the competitive environment. And so maybe a couple of minutes on, what do you see some threats to Epson and perhaps some opportunities out in the environment that maybe we didn't anticipate pre-pandemic either?
Oh, there's so many opportunities. I mean, we are very fortunate. I mean, we have the world's most advanced printing technology. And so there are so many things that we can do with that technology, whether it's office printing. We have a huge business in textile printing, which is going to do nothing but grow. There are 3D printing applications. There's so many things that our technology is going to go into, biomedical, all sorts. I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of growth in automation and robotics around the world. And so that, so there are many opportunities. And yes, this pandemic has been an accelerator for many of them. Threats, we have very aggressive competitors who are very talented. So it's, if you're going to be on the Epson team, you got to like to compete and like to compete, like to win. But that's what part of what makes it fun every day. So I don't see anything really new on that side. I mean, it's every day. We say some of our markets are like a boxing match. I mean, as soon as you throw one punch, your opponent is hitting you with another one. So you got to stay on your feet and just stay at it.
You brought up 3D printing applications, and that relates to two different questions. One question was, with the decline of printing, right? People just don't print as much anymore. How are you thinking about your printer business? But you started to address it a little bit, but there is a specific question about growth initiatives specifically related to 3D printing. Where is the industry currently, and what needs to happen for mass adoption?
Well, okay, for the first part, okay, yeah, declining printing. I get it. Yeah, declining printing, of course. So, I don't know if people remember, if you go back probably about 7-8 years ago, there was all this talk in the press about the decline of the automobile, because people were going to use Uber type services. No one was going to own an automobile. And so, basically that industry was going to die. And so what has happened is that That's not happening. Instead, what's happening is a transition from gasoline automobiles to electric automobiles, and Elon Musk is now the richest man in the world. Okay, so that industry that was about to die has now produced the richest man in history. The printing industry is far larger than most people understand. Okay, and so what has to happen to the printing industry? Yes, part of it will decline, but the rest of it needs to be reinvented and become more sustainable. And Epson has the best printing technology in the world to do that, in terms of low energy consumption, using materials that are not damaging to the environment. So we see massive upside in the traditional, we are like the electric car of the printing industry. So we see massive upside. And then, yeah, there are all these other technologies that you can print as well, whether it's textiles and fabrics and then even additive manufacturing. Did I answer your question, Paula?
I believe you did. Yeah,
okay,
great. So I think we're at about time. So I'm going to do my best to do Terry's takeaways, or the so what's from our discussion today. And I think, we talked about the shift to remote and distributed work. And I think the number one point I took away there was key to success and fundamental to success is you have to understand things from the perspective of the employee. So employee empathy is critical during any transition, particularly one that impacts their day-to-day lives so significantly. A couple of the things that helped to make Epson's transition successful, and I think they're just great business takeaways, right? Sounds like you challenged your assumptions, right? Because a lot of people assumed what the outcome would be, and they were wrong. So you challenged the assumptions. When you actually implemented your plan, you pushed boundaries, right? People expected it to be conservative, but you really pushed the boundaries with that, and it sounds like it was successful. And then one size fits all didn't make sense. So you really pushed a lot of the decision-making into the places where the decisions needed to be made. Another takeaway that I have from this transition, but also can apply to any transition, is use the tools you have, but in a different way. So you talk to and lean on what you already have. We talked about part of the workforce really was remote already. Like in most companies that have regional sales forces, they are remote and distributed companies already and always have been. So that DNA is there in the culture, and maybe people always just thought about, well, that's sales, as opposed to that's an incredibly effective way to get work done. So leaning on the tools that you already have to build solutions on top of that. Another really important takeaway relative to supply chain, you said, is that they really need to be thought about from a risk management perspective, right? Nobody anticipated the pandemic, and probably nobody will anticipate whatever the next thing is. But if there's more of a risk management perspective around supply chain, perhaps things will be protected. And then finally, as you were talking about Epson's sustainability strategy and climate pledge, I was reflecting back on the recycling logo, right? Reduce, reuse, recycle, right? And you really you actually used the word reclamation, or to reclaim the metals and the paper pulps. And I was even thinking about that relative to our own small world. Like, I try to buy jewelry that's actually made from all repurposed products, because you can buy beautiful jewelry that it does not involve digging into the ground anywhere. And that's a really simple example, but Epson's doing that on a global scale. And I think the impacts are huge coming out of that. So really this reusing of products and then recycling. So recycling the products you have and then reusing and repurposing into something else. To me, that was quite profound.
Well, yeah, so actually, and the history is we actually started construction on our new headquarters about 1 month before the pandemic started. And so we were building it, we were already committed. So it was in construction during the pandemic, and I moved into it basically with 5 of my coworkers. There's 165,000 square feet here in Los Alamitos. But this facility, this is a 50-year-old building. Okay, so we had looked at all these proposals for a brand new, beautiful, shiny new headquarters. And we found this campus in Los Alamitos, which is a little bit off the beaten path from where a lot of our industry headquarters are, maybe in Cerritos or in Torrance and different places. But it was a perfect size facility. It wasn't ideally perfect, but we came up with a plan to make it work. And we saved all those resources of knocking down a building, trashing all of that material and starting from scratch. And by the way, we saved a lot of money in the process of doing that. So I think a lot of these, these sustainable things are not just good for the planet, but they're good business as well if you can look at things differently. And I think on the sustainability side, it's going to take all of us thinking about how we do things differently. We're not going to get to where we need to go by anyone saving the day for all of us. It's going to take every company, every government to do their part. And so there's not going to be a winner. Okay, either we all win together, or we all lose. Okay, so we all have to do our part. So I like your wrap up. I think that's absolutely good.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith. I found this really excellent and really enjoyed spending time with you today.
Thank you. I hope that people listening in did as well. I enjoyed it, Paula. Thank you.
Excellent. Listen, let me add my own thanks. First of all, Paula, you're great at doing the so whats. I love it. We're going to have you moderate a whole bunch of events for us. And Keith, let me just say a big thank you. I mean, I've gotten so much about transformation from you. Transformation, kind of workforce and workforce practices, how you think about transformation of product, the whole demand of product and supply chain management, and how you think about climate. For those of you who haven't met Keith, I spent a little bit of time with him, and he's always very humble about Epson and himself. We're not a flashy tech company, but I have to say the transformation and the forward thinking, you're in the 90th percentile, and I'm very, very impressed. So let me just say my own thank you for what you've shared with the broader UCLA community.
Hey, thanks, Terry. Thanks for the opportunity. By the way, Forbes magazine just named Epson the most sustainable company in all of Japan. So I'll toot our own horn there.
Well done.
Hey, one other thing I would add is I think key is being optimistic, looking for the positive side of things. I think, and I think part of that is even if you've been in a difficult position, you always have to reassess. Okay, and I think a lot of people are sort of getting entrenched in their positions. And this whole thing and where the business world's going to go coming out, you got to forget about the decisions you made 6 months ago. You got to start with a clean slate constantly, okay? Yeah. Because you're still learning. And so just be optimistic. There's going to be growth. There are going to be opportunities. So you got to go find them.